Hello, welcome back to the channel. My name is Louie, I go by they them pronouns and I'm an illustrator. And last year in spring, so quite a while ago, I sat down with Natalie Byrne, a friend and fellow illustrator. In case you're not familiar with her work, she's amazing. She has this style that is very loud and bold and courageous and full of joy. And you can find her on all the social media channels with @Natalie Byrne. I'll also leave all her links in the description. She talks a lot about mental health and self-love. She also made an amazing zine about breakups, and she did this amazing book called Period, which I can't recommend enough. It is absolutely beautiful and informative and just a joy to read. So go and support Natalie. And yeah, we sat down to have a chat about our experience coming into the illustration industry with a working class background. This turned out to be quite a long chat. It's very much a podcast-like video, so if you want to pop us on in the background while you do your laundry or your dishes or water your plants or whatever, feel free to do that. You're not missing out on any visual exciting things. There's also another video going up on Natalie's channel, so if you just can't get enough of the two of us chatting away, then go over to her channel and check that out as well. And with all that being said, past me, take it away. Well, thank you for joining me today. And yeah, we want to talk about working class illustration career stuff. I mean, we've talked about this a lot before, so I feel like we have a lot of things to discuss, but maybe let's start with childhood stuff, or like early on, because when I was growing up, I always heard you can't go into the arts industry because you won't make any money and you will starve. Did you hear something similar? Did you have like a similar narrative going on? Did that, like, do you still feel? I still feel terrified to this day that I will starve.
I'm terrified to my bones. But I think what helped me is that my mum, being from Chile, when she came to this country and she could see that, you know, I live in England, and that as a, you know, I really struggled in school, and my parents were terrified. Oh my God, she's going to end up, how is she gonna, you know, is she going to be okay? And even the school were really like, this one, she's got problems. Just I had dyslexia, and yeah, really struggled with my attention in school, and I was quite shy, and I wasn't a bad kid, but yeah, I think that was a big fear. But I think what helped with my mum coming from Chile was that she could see that that there was more opportunities, essentially, and that, especially I have an older brother. I wasn't the first. I think that helped with like my mum seeing that, because my brother is a graphic designer, and he could see that, you know, if you work hard at something that you love, even if it's not, you know, the traditional jobs, that there's opportunities and there's like money in the creative arts. I think that helped. I think my mum she always really hammered it home to us that you have to work, that we will have to work very hard, being working class, being you know, with no trust fund or anything like that. I was like, you're gonna have to work really hard in whatever it is. Even she, you know, her brother's a doctor, and still, even then in Chile, being a doctor, the pension is bad and the pay isn't that good. So I mean, I think the pay is good, but it's still, you know, it's not, it's I think no matter what you go into, you're going to have to work really hard. So you might as well pick something that has an element of joy in it. And I think she was quite good at that. And she's works in a nursery, so she understood the power of having fun and creativity as a tool for learning. So that was very helpful. And we didn't have much, but we had so much like love and joy. And I think my mum really was she was great for playing and like making up games and things like that, which I think when you have no money and you don't have money to buy in access, like she was just really great at encouraging us to use our imagination. And I think that is, and being resourceful. Like we didn't have money to buy like Pokemon cards, for example, so my mum told us to like make our own, and so we just made our own. So yeah, I think sometimes being really naive can be actual strength, because it's like, okay, I'm just gonna go into the arts and figure it out. And I think actually working class people and people of lower classes are incredibly resourceful, and I think that is really needed when you have a creative business.
Yeah, but I love what you mentioned about your brother being in graphic design, so sort of like maybe role model is too much. I don't know your relationship with your brother that well, but seeing how somebody does something similar and is successful at it, I think that's like a massive help, because like I didn't have that. Looking back, I didn't know anybody making it in the creative field. I was like, I only hear from starving artists, and I have never personally met an artist who isn't starving. I also haven't met a starving artist, so they must not exist. Let's not do it. So I didn't even think like, oh, I can figure this out because other people have also figured it out. I just didn't have that knowledge. I didn't have that support, sort of. So I didn't study illustration, and now I'm kind of sad for myself.
I don't think that's a bad, I think that's actually a strength, and that goes back to the sense of like, I think when you are so naive, and I see this time and time again, you know, so many people because I studied graphic design at college, which is like 2 years before you go to university, and then studied graphic design at uni. And honestly, I've seen so many more people who have traditional education in creativity kind of feel even more so discouraged than someone who was like maybe building a business on the side, because so often these teachers how am I going to say this in a nice way? So often it's just really important to learn from people who know what they're talking about. And then also I think bad habits that people have are then taught, if that makes sense. So I have some people that did fine art who picked up their teachers' bad mistakes, like, oh, you'll never be able to make a living out of this, all creative people are poor, and all these like things that are honed down. And it's actually maybe that one person I can't tell, I'm going to say this in a nice way.
You could say it in a mean way, it's fine.
Who clearly has some missing knowledge on how to be incredibly successful and has now gone to teach. I don't know, it's just, I'm really passionate about creative teaching and also learning from working artists. And I've also seen time and time again, especially people from marginalized groups, have gone through the educational system, said that they have this dream, and then it be completely crushed by a white man. And it's so frustrating.
Yeah.
And I get this as well. Like I get like a lot of people who are like, I've always been told that if I do creativity, I'll be poor. And it's like, there are people out there who are creative, who are very successful, and we just need to go out and find them and, you know, learn from those people. Because I do think that it's just like learning driving from someone who's terrible at driving, like, you know, which I know people do. It just perpetuates these like bad mistakes and bad thoughts on creativity.
Yeah, it's true. Like learning creative things, or being a good artist doesn't necessarily make you a good business person as well.
100%.
And like the people we do see in media are these like highly successful people, and I'm fine with being moderately successful. That's okay with me.
A success to me is got nothing to do with money. I think I find success is, am I able to work with people I believe in? Am I able to make work that I believe in? Am I able to structure my days? Am I able to, I mean, so many other things that are not money related. I think money comes into it.
I love that, having your own definition of success and what that means. But I mean, you did mention the trust fund earlier, which I was slightly
not in my life.
Yeah, slightly mad that I don't have one. And I mean, I think that's something many people don't realize what it does. Like not even just having a trust fund, but having that financial support from your family. And I mean, I know from many illustrators who, after they graduated from uni, they had to move back home with their parents to save rent, or their parents supported them financially through 3 unpaid internships or something like that. And not having parents who are like, sure, I can pay your rent for a couple of months, that's no problem. I feel like some people don't know how stressful that is.
People don't know what it's like. Some people don't know what that's like. It's just like a foreign thing to them. Like, oh, I don't know. What I will say is I grew up in Buckinghamshire, which I don't have to explain. It sounds like a posh area. So I grew up around like a lot of wealth and I had, you know, and then working in London, and I've met people along my path that, you know, have been born into incredible amounts of wealth. And what I will say is that once things started in my career started to snowball, and I started to I suppose go to these like fancy events and meet other people, especially, you know, people who are extremely privileged. I started to really see, I mean, after a lot of struggle, a lot of hard work, that now that I am here, I wouldn't change it for the world, because I have been in rooms where someone incredibly successful wrote a book that did really well, and as soon as she left the room, everyone, even if her own cousin, was like, the only reason she got that book was because her dad's famous. And this idea of like it I don't know, I think it was like a full circle moment of like, that's a horrible thing to witness as someone who, that's a friend of mine, she left the room, everyone's bitching about her, and to see like, at least no one can ever say that about me, no one can ever diminish my success. And
but I will find other ways to diminish it.
Oh, 100%.
Like, people are always mean if they want to be mean.
Yes, but I think when you grew up working class, you're so proud, and that is something that is just like, I'm so proud of it. And I think moments like that make me pissed off, because like no one's success should be diminished like that. But then also it's a sense of like, okay, now I've seen the other side of it, how it does benefit me in a sense of like in everything. It's so interwoven in all my identity, I think, in how hard work and how I run my business and how I think and in how I want my life to look. I think is because of the memories I have from seeing my parents struggle and all of that. And then I've also seen people who have had it extremely easy give up at the moment of any sense of tiny struggle, and then be like, you're really going to give up because of that? Really? And there's a sense, I think, that when you have struggled because, you know, my dad's also an alcoholic, and so we had some like hard times, especially as a very young child, and seeing things that people that didn't grow up with addiction will never understand. I think that it's a trauma and a pain I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But there is a resiliency, I think, that comes from things like that. That's like, I'm not going to give, I think that it's just different. Yeah,
but it's so many mixed feelings about it. There's this meme on Instagram that's been going around for quite a while, where one person is like, oh, you're so resilient, I'm so impressed, I wish I would be more like you. And the other person's like, thanks, my options were that or death.
Yes.
Cool.
It is, yes.
I'm proud of who I am and how strong I am and the resilience that I have. And like the trust I have in my own abilities, but also I'm like,
it shouldn't have been that way.
It shouldn't be that way. Yeah. And I mean, you mentioned before, like you give a lot of advice to younger creatives who also want to go into the creative industries, that you feel a sort of push and pull of, I love what I do and I want other people to be able to do the same thing, but also no young person should have to go through that struggle. You want to talk about that?
I always encourage young people who are like, I want to start my own business, I want to be a creative business in some way, and they're like, when do you know is the right time to go full time? And I always say, like, well, when I was completely overworked doing 2 jobs, one running my own business and one working full time, and I think so much of my success has come from my full-time work within the creative industry, or even waitressing and customer service work has helped me so much run a shop and deal with clients. And so I think it's so important to be like, full-time work is, and building things slowly on the side is the only way I was able to do it. And I think there is, even just being a full-time artist, I find it a push and pull between encouraging more people to do it. And I know that a YouTuber called who's also an illustrator, called Halle also did a video on this, about how the creative industry budgets, from what I'm seeing and from what I'm hearing from the generations above us, the budgets are getting smaller and smaller, the deadlines are getting shorter and shorter. It is about who you know. It is about doing personal unpaid work to build a portfolio, then you can potentially maybe get your dream client. And I think there is so much overworking, there's so much expectation of overworking. And is that something I feel comfortable encouraging young people to get into? Sometimes not. Sometimes not. And I also have to admit, like, I am enormously privileged. I sound the way that I do, and I know that that helps me. And I'm very white. And even though we grew up struggling, you know, I have enormous amount of privilege in my own story. And so it's like, how I even had help. There was a grant at university. There was grants when I was at school that have been completely stripped and taken away from younger kids, which makes me so emotional, because I don't know if I could have gone 100%. I wouldn't have been able to go to university if I was born right now. I wouldn't have been able to not have started working from 14, because I had a grant from when I was a teenager. It was called the EMA. We were given £30 a week if you were under a certain threshold, and that is non-existent anymore. Our Tory government has taken it away, and so I don't know what I would have done. What would I have done?
Same. I feel the exact same way. Throughout uni, throughout my student time, I had a scholarship, so throughout all of my time in university, I didn't have to worry about money. And that really enabled me to grow my business on the side and be like, okay, I'm officially a full-time student, but I'm sacrificing all my student life and free time to build my business, because I know the moment I graduate, the moment I don't have that scholarship anymore, I need to be able to financially support myself completely with that.
Did you have any people pissed off at your grants? Because I had some people at university that really weren't happy about my grants.
No, but I think it's different in Germany, because we don't have these tuition fees like you do in the UK. So I don't think people are that jealous. I mean, going to university is still a very, very privileged thing to do here. And like, there's a statistic of like, I think if your parents didn't go to uni, only 10 out of 100 kids actually get a degree. And if your parents did go to uni, it's like 40 or 50 or even more. So it's like, there's still this huge difference. And I think often I maybe was the only person in the room when I was at uni who was going from social welfare to graduating. I think a lot of people couldn't really relate to that and had parents who supported them financially or were able to do that. And also the scholarship that I got was for political activism. So people felt like I earned it because I worked
That's
for
really
it.
good. For in the UK, I think I got, because my household income, that's how they do the grants, was under a limit. That's how they did it. So it was just like, if they just tallied it up like that. But I also went the last year before the fees went up, and so they went from $3,000 a year to $9,000 a year. So I kind of experienced my first year was with like the last fee that it was cheap, and because I got in the door, that's how my payment stuck. But then I failed, so I got to keep the same amount of money that I was paying, but then I got to experience those two separate classrooms. On like the classroom that there were so many kids, they allowed the room to be with so many people because they knew it was the last year to be cheaper. There were kids sitting on like the floor to like the following year when it was just empty, and every day was like heartbreak for me because I was looking around realizing that there were just so many kids that would have been in my position that just wouldn't have been able to go. And then that was the group of kids that I got on with everyone, and I think I had difficult conversations when they came up. But those were the people that were really confused about the fact that I had to work.
Love that.
Assuming me to leave early was me being slacking rather than having to like go to my job. And I think the bonus that I was very lucky in was that everyone really, really wanted to be there. Whereas the year that was cheaper, the energy was like, oh, I'll give this a go and I'll see. And so there was a lot of people that were really not very, how do you say, like, I'm going to be this and this is what I'm going to use this degree to get to the next way. It was more just like, this is the last year, it's cheap, I guess I'll just do graphic design, I guess I'll just go. So I think I was very lucky that I was surrounded by people who were so, so passionate. And I think I feel like very strange how I ended up there. But maybe, you know, those difficult conversations at first ended up being really beautiful friendships. So, you know, it just goes back to conversations we've had. When you have those conversations, it's people just sometimes need a bit of education on different experiences. So,
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips on how to deal with that pressure of like, I need to have a day job, I need to have another job, I need to worry about money all the time? How do you cope?
You know, a friend of mine went back to university actually, and she was in exactly the same position as me. We both worked our bar job at the same place, worked till 4 a.m, and were in university at 10 a.m. the next day, and it broke us. We both were completely broken by that. And she went back to university because when I was at uni with her, she was studying law. So it was very full on. And yeah, she wanted a career change, so she went back to uni to study coding. And she said, because she saved money and then went back and allowed that money so that she didn't have to get a part-time job. She was just like, complete different experience. And she said, like, no one should have had to have done what we did. Completely destroy your health to try and get yourself out of your situation and your class, and to try and do what you want to do. It's so unfair. It's really unfair. And I remember I had like diarrhea for like 2 years because I was having energy drinks to stay awake, not sleeping. I mean, trying to eat when I could, and then sleeping at 4 or 5 in the morning, trying to have a social life, having a boyfriend, uni deadlines, like it's just and the days when it was like my birthday would be the days I would be so ill because I had really bad anxiety, real bad diarrhea. And the days when it was like, okay, I've taken the day off, we've saved money to go do something nice, that would be when I would be so ill because I couldn't relax. I was like, I felt so guilty. I would have panic attacks every day. Oh, it was awful. I think if I was the best advice I would say to my younger self maybe would be just maybe wait a year and work and save that money so that maybe you have a bit more of a, like, there's no rush. There was no rush for me to get to university at a certain time. I was a bit older because I kind of did an extra year, I guess, because I changed from being at school to college. So I was like a year older than everyone. And still, I feel like I could have, I don't know, I feel like there's no rush. There's no rush to get to university, I think. And I think especially with what I know now of how real life experience, it is so valuable. And there's ways, you know, to get interns, I guess, like to get like jobs in marketing or something that's semi-creative that could help. And that real life experience, you actually learn so much more than when you're at university. I don't think I would have been, this is a conversation me and my mum always have. I'm like, I didn't really learn that much.
Same.
And she's like, no, but you would have gone because you loved it. I really loved learning. I loved the idea of kind of walking around with my books and like going to class and being around people who are creative as well. But I think, you know, that was 4 years where it feels like such a short amount of time, whereas like in the past 4 years of my running a business or working with clients or even working as a designer when I was full-time working as a designer, those 4 years I've learned so much more than actually being at uni. It's a difficult one. I love things like, that's why I do workshops on Daisie and things like Skillshare are so important, because I think it's so important to, I think there is other ways. You don't have to
go to uni. Yeah.
Even though it's great. I just think actually the artists as well that I meet that haven't gone to uni, their art is really unique, really, really unique. And I think that the people that go to university, me being one of them, encouraging more people to get into debt to go to university, it kind of perpetuates the whole university thing of like, it is meaningful. If more amazing people come from these universities, I think we as a society think, okay, then that's what you need to do to become successful. And I think it's almost like it's like a cycle that perpetuates itself. And
I mean, it's not really what you have to do, but it's kind of nice to have that space where you can just explore your own style, experiment, work in different mediums, learn from artists who have been artists for a longer time. I hope for younger people who want that for themselves that they can access it. But I love what you said about there's no rush, because I don't know, I think it's easy to constantly feel like, oh, I'm behind. I feel like that. I have a friend, Owen Davey. He's amazing. He's the sweetest human you can imagine. He's not that much older than me, and he's published like, I don't know, 20 books or something. And every time I talk to him and he just casually finished 2 more kids' books, I'm like, oh, I'm so behind. And then I look at other friends who completely change what they're doing at 28, and they're like, tried it, didn't work for me, now I'm going to go and study something new and work on a completely different field. So I don't know, I feel like not rushing and being like, there's no race, I can still work as a creative in my own pace. That really, really helps me in some ways.
Yeah. And your books take a lot of research.
It's not a kid's book. That's what I keep telling myself. It's not a kid's book with, I mean, Owen does these nonfiction books about animals. They also take a lot of research, but it's just 30 pages or something. So yeah.
The Break the Mold book that I illustrated, I said yes to everything. You know how like everything comes at once? I think I made all those illustrations for Break the Mold in like 2 weeks from start to finish, in the sense of like it was just black and white as well, and I was working with the writer. I didn't have to think of them. It was like clear, this is what we need. So you know, every process is different.
Every process is different. Yeah. But talking about books, I mean, illustration is already hard enough to get into, but I think publishing is maybe even harder in some ways. I mean, we just had a chat about my book that's coming out today over on your channel. I will link it in the caption. But yeah, you also created your beautiful book Period. You did Break the Mold. What were some of your biggest struggles going into making books?
So the 2 books are completely different. Like I've mentioned, like Break the Mold was someone else had written it. Who said wrote it? Being an author, I said the wrong word. And yeah, it was like the final missing piece, and everything that was kind of all set and done. And Period, I've written myself, and that was, I was making it alongside when I was still working as a graphic designer, and it is also with the smaller publishing press, whereas Break the Mold is with the big one, the big boy. So very different processes, and yeah, I think it is, there's so much, I think, about once you, it's like I think creative careers definitely tend to snowball. Like once you start getting a few things, it's so much easier to get your door in the other people's doors. And I think the biggest struggle, I think when I made Period, I was so like, no one's gonna buy this. It's just so like, and I was already getting orders from people I knew from saying like, I'm gonna make a little book for children that's about periods. I already started getting orders in from like my mum's friends who had kids and like my own friends. So I was like, oh, this is just gonna go straight to people that I know. And then as I started to share work on periods on my Instagram, it did just start to snowball. And then I met at an event, I met the publishers. So it was a very organic process. And I knew their first book they published, which was 100 Women I Know, which is an amazing book about consent. And so they were people who really understood activism and talking about what needed to be talking about and making books on that. And they basically made a publishing press to make that book. So it was very natural. It felt a very organic process making it. But yeah, there was so much self-belief, and I think that's why it's so important to, if you do want to find a publisher, to find someone that believes in you and gets your work. I didn't take it to anyone else, period, because I just, once I found people that believed in it, I was like, that's all I want. And I was still very unconfident. So I remember even before I met my publishers and people were saying like, maybe you should take it to bigger publishing houses. I wasn't confident yet. And I just thought, I don't want to really be in a room with people who might want the idea to be something else, because I don't know if I can fully back myself yet. And I think everything worked out for the best, because I just had the most amazing experience making Period with people who really understood the space, the period space as well, and like activism, and who were already doing that kind of work anyway. So I think it was difficult. I think I never really thought anyone was going to get it buy it, really. I just worked on, it was so much work making it. And I remember doing press like the week it came out, and I was like, oh my God, people are going to fucking buy this book. Like really hitting me. And I think I work very much in that sense. And I don't know whether that's insecurity or whether I just have to completely block out what the hell is going on around me to really get my work done. and try and be myself and authentic as possible. But I think my biggest struggles with everything has been believing in myself, and I think that's really clear with my work. A lot of my work is very honest about my own mental health and stuff, and I'm sure there's been many no's I've gotten in my life, but what I feel like is, maybe this is a whole like conversation with my therapist about, like, I always just feel like the biggest problem the biggest thing that gets in the way, I think, is always me. And so when I just kind of let my curiosity and my passion guide me, and I'm just like, go forward with that, I feel like I work through it. But I think being around people as well who really believe in you has been so important. And that's why I really value our friendship, because I think it's those moments when you have those bad days, or like you get a no, and having those people around you to pick you back up. But yeah, I think I don't know, I'm quite naive. I just kind of like, yeah, I'm gonna do this thing, whatever.
Yeah, like my experience is very similar, of like starting in a very naive way and then just going with the flow and things growing sort of organically. And my first book was my thesis project in uni. That's how it started. And then it somehow became a book, and that somehow turned into a second book deal, and that somehow turned into me being signed with a literary agent who now, I don't, like with the first book, I also was with a smaller press, so I had the whole book finished, and the first time that I got paid for the book was 1 year after publication date, so quite a long time. There was no advance or anything. That's also how it worked with the second book. And now working with an agent, I have, like, the doors are open to me for bigger publishing houses where I'm just like, hello, I have this idea, I wrote a concept of 10 pages for you to look at, please give me a lot of money so I can work on this. And, you know, just knowing that that's how it can work is great. But also looking back at my first book, where the starting point, I'm like, oh fuck, this is so privileged, because I had the scholarship, I was able to do it. And other artists from working class backgrounds who are struggling financially maybe don't, like, that first moment of how do you find your starting point? How do you make a book without financially ruining yourself, without ruining your mental health? If you don't have an agent, don't have the contacts, you don't really know where to start. I really, really struggle with being so privileged.
You know, I think the making a book is a long, usually a real long project, and more often than not, compared to all the work I do, and other authors I speak to, and people in publishing, they always say, you know, no one makes a book because they want to make loads of money. It's more so, for me, what I have seen, making books can be a leading to loads of other things. So I was kind of seen as almost an expert on periods because I had made a book about periods. I got loads of opportunities because of that. I think also it can build trust with more traditional way of working. I think it can make people take you seriously, but I think that it's such a big project to take on doing a book, especially if you're going to illustrate it and write it, that it has to be one of these projects that's like, if I don't make this before I die, it will suck. Like, life will suck. And I feel like about that with the books I made. And I'm working on one second book. I haven't really talked about it, but I feel that way. Like, I have to do this. If I don't do this before I die, like, it's gonna, I just have to do this before I die. And I think that has been just the guiding thing. I think it was never like, I'm gonna make a book to make a business decision so that people see me as legit. It just was like a bonus added on. But that's why I think it can be so important for people who have a great idea for a book to make the book, because if you're an artist or creative, it can lead to a bunch of other opportunities that can be very financially rewarding. But I just worked on it very slowly. With Period, I just looked at every subject like it was just an Instagram post, or like every
Yeah, you mentioned that to me before, like repurposing the work you're doing and not just using it for the book. And I think that's very, very smart.
repurposing everything. I mean, the way that I got a job with Nike, because I don't know why I said Nike, that's an American way of saying it, so we say Nike. And I took a page that was a yoga page, because they asked me, do you have any like pictures of someone doing illustrations of someone doing exercise, and I literally just took that file from the exercise bit in Period and like sent it to them. I always repurpose everything, absolutely everything. So, and I think that as well, if you are working on a book, it's really important to share, maybe not that you're working on a book, but share what you're writing about, or what you're illustrating about, or what your topic is, because you have to build that trust with that audience that you know what you're talking about when it comes to this topic. So when you do announce the book, that people know you for talking about that one subject. But yeah, I repurpose everything. That's why I love working digitally and with vectors. I'm just trying to get used to the iPad, but I still find it very difficult.
Yeah, I love the idea of repurposing. I also love how social media allows us to kind of grow our own audience. And if no publishing house wants to pick up my idea, I can still do a webcomic. And if I have my audience, they will probably read the webcomic. And looking at what happened with Heartstopper, for example, that started out as a webcomic with just a couple of people reading it. And now it's a Netflix show, which is wild. Also, Heartstopper, so cool. So cool. Comic, it's so cool. Okay, we can talk on for ages now about Heartstopper, but do you have any like final words of wisdom, anything you would like to share with the internet about your career as a working class person?
I guess one thing I always like to say to people is like, my whole illustration style is because I had no time. Like, I was doing many things. Like, my style is like simple. I stick to very specific colors, and I don't often use different colors. It was all a thing because I was waitressing, I was working full time, and I wanted to post on social media every day. And so I just made decisions ahead of time about the topics I was going to talk about, and just try to be very like, my whole creative business essentially came out of the fact that from a product of my situation of being working class and not having any time. And I think that sometimes you can take your weaknesses can end up being strengths sometimes. And even just like, I have dyslexia. I think that people who read Period who also had dyslexia just connected to it. And I think that it's so, I don't know, I think the way that I wrote that book was like, oh, when I was this age, I couldn't understand these long words, like even like difficulty or like because. And so I always tried to write and make things more simple and more simple. And I think that that's ended up being such a strength in my career. And so, yeah, I guess the best thing I can share is like, sometimes your weaknesses can be a strength.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I'm just going to leave it like that. I could go on for ages and ages talking to you about this. But yeah, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Chatting with me. And yeah, that's it. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Natalie, for joining me in this video, for recording this with me, and for like always having great conversations about our experiences. And thank you all for hanging out with us today. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like and subscribe buttons, but also give Natalie all my online love and go and follow her, support her, watch her videos, buy her book if you want to and can. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed our chat. I will see you again next week or 2 weeks from now, I'm not sure. But thank you so much for being here. Massive shout out to my Patreons who receive like a rambly voice note in a similar length every other week, just with me, not with other people. But if that's something you're interested in, then go over and support me on Patreon. That's very much appreciated. But also just thank you for being here and watching this. And yeah, see you next time. Bye.